Tonight, rescuers are desperately searching for at least 173 people still missing in Texas as the death toll rises to 120 from Friday's devastating flash floods. With such a large scale of loss, people are angry and understandably very upset. They want someone or something to blame. Many are pointing to the National Weather Service cuts as a reason why some areas were taken by surprise. But this meteorologist cautions about jumping to that or any conclusion yet.
People have been speculating that National Weather Service budget cuts prevented staffing. Typical staffing at a Weather Service forecast office is like 2 to 3 meteorologists. There were 5 there at the time the warnings were issued, so that was not a factor. What I will say, however, is that the lack of weather balloons in certain parts of the country due to federal budget cuts may have slightly degraded our ability to forecast this in advance because you have less data going into the models and therefore a coarser, less accurate simulation of what may occur in the future.
So let's talk about what we do know. We know National Weather Service data shows the number of flood deaths has increased in recent years. The Washington Post writing, quote, across the country, 145 flood-related deaths were reported in 2024, well above the 25-year average of 85 flooding-related deaths per year. And this comes at a time when Trump wants to gut NOAA, including eliminating funding for climate research. So while we might not be able to say the cut led to this person's death, we can say that the lack of information could make us less safe in the future. Our nightcap is still here. Alan, we had 4 recorded flood events all within a week: Texas, North Carolina, New Mexico, and Chicago. Is this a good time to be making huge cuts when we're having more weather-related events?
So obviously with Texas, it's far too soon to draw a direct link, but this is going to be a result of DOGE and all of the very high-profile cuts, particularly cuts involving science and research and all of this other funding going to universities, for example, is that any time you have a disaster like this is going to be a conversation now. And we know that we're having more and more disasters like this, over the last few years. So I'm not sure that the administration has thought through necessarily what the impact of these cuts are going to be every single time a disaster like this happens, and they're going to be having to answer these questions again and again.
We didn't even mention, or we haven't even talked about yet, the president has the desire to eliminate FEMA. What kind of impact would that have on these communities at times like this?
Well, again, without Monday morning quarterbacking Texas, just looking forward, if there were no FEMA, who does a state turn to? Texas, Florida, these are better equipped states. California, FEMA is the backstop. FEMA goes at the request of the state. It's still the state agencies, the local agencies that are coordinating that. It's sort of like when they talk about eliminating the Department of Education. Well, how are the state agencies that actually run the schools going to fund special education and all those programs that federal money pays for?
Yeah, in the Department of Education case, they didn't take those funds and then redeploy. They said let the states decide, but they didn't give the states the money. If we see these cuts happen, what kind of economic impact could it have? Because we're going to have these big disasters that we will not be prepared for, and we'll have to face the damage after.
Well, I've been thinking a lot over the last week about Katrina, going back 20 years right now, right? And that's something that was not politicized at the time, right? And it was really focusing on just the devastation and the death toll, which was, I think, over 1,000 people. And you think about it, FEMA was a really important part of that recovery, right? And I think there's kind of some lessons that we can take from some of these other natural disasters. But have you been in New Orleans? Recently, large parts of that city have not been rebuilt. There is an economic impact that happens. So again, we've all talked about it. It's really hard to kind of put some of these numbers in around this when we're still looking for folks that, perished in this sort of thing. But I think there's some lessons over the last 20, 25 years where we probably, and the administration is probably going to come around to this a little bit. There's going to be a lot of political pressure on both sides. This happened in a red state, right? And so, at the end of the day, I think there will be an economic impact from a lot of these cuts, but I think in an environment where we're having increased, weather issues like this, and just think about what happened in California. I mean, the list goes on and on. I think cuts to these sorts of, of these departments is just going to be something that's going to keep racking up hundreds of billions of dollars of bills, and it's going to really be a drain on our economic activity if it continues to go this way.
And all these cuts, the whole idea was they're going to pay for Trump's big, beautiful bill. They're going to, were affected, and they didn't. Right? All the cuts that were made, Trump still got this bill through, and it's still going to have huge impact on our debt and deficit. It's not going to help us. So
This is the social safety net, too. I mean, like, this is a part of it, right? And that's a big part of how to pay for these tax cuts, you know? So I just lump it all in there together.
And then they'll still have to do a supplemental. They'll come back to Congress and say we need more money for disaster relief.
good point.
I was going to say, Isaac, thinking back to 2024, right? So many big promises Donald Trump made towards the end of the campaign were about helping rebuild North Carolina after Hurricane Helene, right?
That
was
point.
such a lengthy conversation at the end of the campaign. Not sure what the status of that is, but like that's definitely going to fit in under the umbrella of what we're talking about, right? Like Donald Trump made a lot of promises about disaster relief and rebuilding.